Welcome back to Mother's Foresight. I'm Stephanie, and I'm here with Serena, Hannah, and Ash. Today, on our final episode, we will talk about Fiona and Jane, a novel that ties in with the portrayal of friendship, identity, and the Asian American experience. In this podcast, we will break down how cultural expectations from society and family dynamics are represented in the novel. So, our first talking point is about the structure. So, to basically reiterate the summary on our website, if you guys actually looked at it, Fiona and Jane are two Taiwanese Americans whose narratives alternate between the novel. These stories dive into different moments of their lives, ones that connect the drift experienced from like their teenage years to adulthood, as well as when they reunited again. So, this fragmented structure mirrors the complexities that many Asian Americans experience. And as we move into adulthood, we kind of begin to question like stuff that just occurs, like why we behave the way we do, what drives our desire to feel valued, and how much of our identity is shaped by others, like others' perceptions of us. And these questions I have wondered, and it kind of mirrors both Fiona and Jane as they explore themselves independently away from their close bond they've had since they were young. And so the novel begins with Jane, where her arc revolves around her search for identity. In the beginning, one of the most significant moments in her life is learning her father was gay. And this event corrupts Jane's understanding of her family, especially learning that the man her father was seeing has been like his high school sweetheart. And this man she has known her whole life, known as Uncle Lee. All the times her father traveled for business, she learned was to see Lee. Not only did her conception of her father alter, but it also shifted her relationship with her mother. When Jane's father comes out, it challenges the traditional family structure, and it led to her mother using her faith as a means to express her inability to forgive. In contrast, Fiona's narrative attempts to balance her Taiwanese American heritage with her desire for independence. We see this when she chooses to go to NYU with her boyfriend, where she goes to law school. Her intelligence is further shown by taking college courses during high school, which is mentioned in the novel, but her intelligence contrasts sharply with her self destructive choices. Starting in high school, her drinking habits are used as a coping mechanisms created by her absent father. Fiona's mother often reminded her of the sacrifices they made in coming to America, which created a close bond between them, but also fostered, once again mentioning, a codependent relationship. Due to her challenges, Fiona feels an internalized pressure to excel in school, and her reckless behaviors are basically just a temporary fix, which stems from her internalized struggles with her expectations from her mother. And so the juxtaposition between her impulsive behavior and intellectual capabilities highlights the effects of conflict in her character. Additionally, Fiona's constant failed romantic relationships are tied to drinking, which can symbolize self sabotage. Her struggles reflect a deeper pattern of using destructive behaviors to avoid facing the underlying emotional wounds that shape her relationship and sense of self.
I can understand the self destructive part of having to cope in an environment that constantly stresses you out. It reminded me of a manga that I read long ago that had a panel that said something along the lines of, because you couldn't understand the emotional pain of your heart, you take on self destructive behaviors to be able to understand it because the pain is physical. Fiona feels more relatable as a character because of that, because we see that these flaws in her, such as her alcoholism, is caused by a perfectionist and academic standards that she had set for herself and that she was unable to reach.
Yeah, I feel like the points that you guys are both making about like self-destructive behaviors and kind of like self-sabotaging yourself is so interesting. I don't know if you guys personally find yourselves like relating to any one of the characters or both of them in like just in different ways, but I saw sort of like bits and pieces of myself, like kind of within Fiona's character. Just the fact that like her mom sacrificed so much to get them to where they are, and then just like the need to feel like you've succeeded is just, I feel like, so relatable in my opinion. I think Ho, the author, and her way of like contrasting between the two girls, Fiona and Jane, and their own inherent paths and struggles just made it a lot easier to sort of like, I don't know, just like self-reflect and see bits of yourself in them too.
Yeah, and now that you're like on that topic about like who we see more, I actually saw myself in Jane more. I was raised in a dominantly like Asian and Hispanic area, it was Orange County, California, where I found myself like on a physical appearance level, like relating to my Hispanic friends, but also with my Asian friends having the same experience with parental expectations. This led me to envy my best friend as society like respected her identity. She never had to defend her ethnicity. However, as I reflect now, I realize that she may too have been going through struggles of her identity because it was so apparent. And I think that's just something to really show growth and just reflect on based off of this book.
Yeah, I'm also going off of what you just said. I also for sure feel as though this is like really relevant to us. And I know that I can also just speak for myself that the effects that like society have and like just the pressures of everybody, I feel like it can really get to you, especially now as like a growing adolescent who's like calling it raps on high school because we're all seniors. I feel like just like the questioning of everything that we do, it's like, should I do this or should I do that? Like the whole YOLO thing and just like living your life to the fullest. Just that ideology, while also like balancing the voice of like how others will perceive you. I just feel like I don't know, I just feel like I think this can be really seen in the book and what you're saying. I just feel like it really resonates and connects.
So yeah, because of that, I think the book is more unique in the sense that it's told through snapshots into the girls' lives. It's more of a non-linear plot. If you guys like those type of stories, we can but we can easily see how similar these stories are, even though they diverge from each other. They take on separate character growths. That's a huge point in the story. We can see them take two different paths, and yet their mother's shadow is the thing that haunts them.
Yeah, and as we're connecting back to the alternating narratives, the use of this is like to reflect Fiona and Jane's journey of growth and identity. Though we can see their struggles in determining who they are individually, the novel reveals like their journey towards belonging through the actual like progression of the novel. Like each step, it's very like chaotic sometimes, but also each step, like Fiona and Jane like learn things about themselves, which contribute to the end where they kind of have their own identity. And so this leads me to my second talking point, which will be a little bit shorter. Um, and it's about Asian representation, actually. So, as I mentioned briefly above, the two main characters hold Asian identities. They are second generation Asian Americans of immigrants and both of Taiwanese descent. While the novel doesn't intersect entirely with the Asian experience, it portrays how these identities interact with issues such as love, friendship, sexuality, and success. Both depictions of these characters highlight the internalized complexities that come with being an Asian American. Fiona and Jane are confronted with the expectations of family and society, yet the novel refrains from reducing them to these representations of these social pressures. The narratives provide space for them to go beyond these stereotypes. Both characters struggle with impulse, love, and loss, and their desires for belonging are personal, shaped by the distinct ways they were raised. And this concept of identity exceeds more than just ethnicity. So, as we're on the topic of just stereotypes and a desire for belonging, that is kind of shaped with Fiona and Jane for independency, but just also just finding out where they belong in the world. And so we know that as you are younger, you kind of struggle with finding your place. And with Fiona, hers was to kind of conform to society. And this is how the quote goes that I found. She'd become Fiona in the second grade, shortly after she and her mother arrived in the States. A white boy in Miss King's class had declared that Ona wasn't a real name. She was new, and the boy spoke authority, so she'd believe him, and that was on page 53. So we see that Fiona is shaped by society. She doesn't go at all by her original name or her birth name, and even years later into adulthood, she still goes by Fiona. Although she does look for where she belongs in the world, in the world of relationships, love, heartbreak, whatever, she still goes by Fiona, which kind of shows the effects of just people have, like children have, which says a lot about you. Um, I mean, if I relate this towards me, my last name being Yugi, it's Japanese, though I have no Japanese or biological origins. It's pretty long story, but it's technically pronounced like Yuge, but because we're in America, I was told that it sounded really odd when I was younger. So I've just been going by Yugi, and although I am like in a sense ready to just embrace how it does sound because it's correct in like Japanese dialect. Yeah, I've grown up my whole life being called Yugi, and so I feel like that kind of just stuck with me. And this feeling kind of just relates to Fiona, where although she could go back to her birth name, um, just sticking to Fiona's just shows, in a way, growth about how maybe things don't matter and that's just who you are now. And then now we will, now I'll kind of connect this vulnerability being younger to my next talking point. And so, bringing this into talking point 3, the novel focused mainly on friendship, but also having the influence of Asian parental expectations. And so, connecting these both, envy is pretty common, which relates to why I resonated a little bit with Jane. So, Fiona and Jane, they have been friends since second grade. And as mentioned before, I believe that second grade is the most vulnerable era like one could be in. Like you have your own family's expectations, not only shaping who you are, but as you grow and you actually enter like a school, you are introduced to society where both children and their parents have a voice in defining you. While Fiona and Jane support each other, Fiona offers wisdom and Jane giving protection. Their bond is complicated by moments of jealousy and comparison. Fiona sometimes felt jealous of Jane's traditional success. In their adult years, Jane had a trusted social circle, whereas Fiona's relationship, both platonic and romantic in New York, kept falling apart. However, Jane felt envious of Fiona's close connection to her mother, as well as her intelligence. So, envy plays a big role in both women's lives, as they constantly compare themselves to each other. This envy highlights their internal struggles of wanting to meet expectations, but also wanting to form their own paths. Fiona desired independence, yet she also wanted to meet the expectations of her boyfriend, who ended up leaving her after they moved to New York from California. And so Jane, on the other hand, she desired love, yet she always wanted to protect those closest to her, which consisted of meeting the expectations of them and even her mother. Especially after her father commits suicide after like after he leaves after finding out like he was gay, she ended up feeling kind of guilty for her mother and like ruining the family, as if her outing him, which is essentially what happened in the novel, led to his death.
Going off of your point about the envy, I would for sure agree that it played such a big role in this book. Because this book just wasn't as reliant on like their Asian identities, like you said, the interactions and the actual plot of what happened in each of their lives proved to be so important. Um, the fact that we're able to consider the feeling of envy and how it played a different role in motivating um, and the forging of their own paths, Fiona and Jane, just like meeting the expectations individually was really cool. Just because I didn't see a lot of that in the other books that we read.
Also, going into it, I thought it was more of a light reading material because of the casual story between these two. However, what hit me was really the fairly realistic depiction of friends as they were growing up together and how their responsibilities change. It definitely felt realistic seeing their parents compare them to each other and such. And you can also see, because of the comparison, you can see how they grow from their childhood to their teenage years to their adulthood. You can see how the envy forms. You can see how the envy has transformed them because of their parents' flawed love.
Yeah, and I really like how you mentioned like realistically, because I feel like that was very accurate, which we're gonna get into that for talking point 4. Just to close up about envy, basically Asian parental expectations play a key role in Fiona and Jane's lives. The codependent relationship Fiona has with her mother creates pressure for her to succeed, which connects to why her reckless behavior continues into adulthood as form of escapism. On the other hand, Jane is expected to follow the same faith as her mother, even after her mother accepts her of coming out. And despite this acceptance, Jane still feels immense power or immense pressure to succeed, both academically and in life, according to her mother's traditional values. This shared experience of familiar pressure strengthens Jane and Fiona's bond, yet it also creates tension between them. While Jane seeks love and validation, Fiona, who has grown up without a father and with her own sets of burdens, craves independence. Both are caught in the struggle to meet their mother's expectations, each yearning for something their upbringing has made difficult to attain. And now, onto my last talking point is about the casuality in the book. So, this novel explores adulthood and the difficulties that follow with a long distance friendship. We view tales from Fiona and Jane's childhood and the actions their mothers left that created their development. Both characters lack a father figure. Jane's father stays behind in Taiwan with his boyfriend, eventually leading to a suicide, as briefly mentioned before. And Fiona's father was unaware that her mother was pregnant when she left. So she was kind of raised by her grandparents a little bit. And then Fiona immigrated to America with her mother, while her grandparents remained behind. So two friends bound by the same cultural heritage found strength and support in each other. The novel explores this friendship, having a beautiful representation of Asian characters without only relying on the struggles in Asian identity. So the author Ho doesn't center the lives around ethnicity, but rather through personal experiences, such as expectations, the alcohol they drink being soju, and the unspoken family dynamics. Fiona and Jane battle the struggles of love, heartbreak, and friendship, and these are crucial experiences like every person can relate to, not just Asian solely.
Yeah, I actually really like the way Ho didn't like rely on ethnicity 100%, but showed how like two girls, like just two best friends were able to like find comfort in each other and their similarities and overlaps. Um it was definitely something different from all the other books we've read. Just through the fact that all the other books are so like Asian identity focused. So I feel like this book and the portrayal of Jane and Fiona's friendship was so like refreshing, while at the same time helps me better understand how experiences can bring people together despite leading very different lives. It's sort of solidified themes that there's always going to be someone out there that shares some sort of common ground with you, no matter how different your lives may look.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely appreciate the realistic depiction of friendships as people grow older and they hold more responsibilities, where they definitely needed each other as they were growing up, and then once they grew up, they did have that separation, their own character arcs, and then they come back together, and then it reminded me a bit of Sula, and because of that, it also reminded me of how there's a specific sort of beauty in female friendships that just has multiple layers. Like in Sula, they were Nell Sula and Nell were both toxic to each other, like how Fiona and Jane were toxic to each other in the book sometimes. But because of that, it can also help someone feel seen in those sort of problems and in relationships. And I will always welcome these sort of stories.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I actually think this is like my favorite book of the four different books that we read. I just found it like super easy to read, and then like you said, it's just I love I love a good book about like a true and genuine friendship. Um, and I think Ho does a really good job at doing that.
Maybe not my favorite, but I can definitely appreciate the certain story plot elements in it. What about you, Steph?
Oh, yeah, I feel like that. Well, they can look at the review page on our website, but I do think that, like growing up, I just always struggled to find just Asian characters, and like it doesn't even have to be emphasizing like on their struggles, just like an Asian character that wasn't just purely like the Asian stereotypes. So I do feel like this novel could have gone a little bit in depth about the parents, because that's kind of how they influence like the character of both Fiona and Jane, and I think that there could have been a little bit more like connection towards the end of the book about their friendship and their reunion. But I do really appreciate how these are actual characters that are just minding their own business, and they just happen to be Asian. Um, so this actually brings us to the conclusion. And so the kind of casuality the characters experience is why like this novel I think is very insightful. This novel avoids leaning too heavily on cultural stereotypes, presenting flawed individuals who just, as I said earlier, happen to be Asian. While culture shapes us, it does not define us entirely. Though our experiences are formed through the influence of society and our parents, we still form our own identities through environmental factors such as our friends. So, thank you for listening to our final podcast. I hope you enjoyed our ways of presenting the Asian American experience.